And there was Georgia caressing him with her smiles and tender glances. And the girls called for a speech. But he was too happy to speak. All that mattered was Georgia was there. Georgia. So he muttered and stuttered and finally said, I can't make a speech, but I'll do a dance. And a dance he did with the roll.
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters. This is Ruined Childhoods, and we are traveling around these United States exploring the cinema, representing each state in alphabetical order. Last week, we stopped over in Alabama to check out the 2002 Reese Witherspoon rom-com classic Sweet Home Alabama. On this episode, we're headed to the 49th state, the last frontier, the sourdough state, birthplace of Jewel. We're talking Alaska. Dan, you're a little closer to Alaska than I am. Can you see Russia from your house?
Yeah, I can see Russia. Yeah,
and that's
sure
all.
can.
And that's all we'll reference of that person.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I'm like, we've got to get that out of the way. We're like, yes, that's where they're from, but also there are other things about Alaska. Many more things.
Yes.
That is one person.
That is just one person. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. Dan, do you have any Alaska anecdotes or anything really much to say personally about Alaska?
Well, Alaska Airlines is actually based here in Seattle. So,
Yep.
Just getting out there ahead of that. That's it. Also, so for those who are new listeners, first of all, welcome.
Hey.
Secondly, something that I was about to say you'll quickly learn about me, and you will because you're going to learn it right now, is that I'm a teacher in my daily life, and we just started the school year, and we were doing some getting to know you bingo.
Oh, okay.
Beginning of the year activities, icebreakers. And one of the questions on the bingo was, you have to find someone in the class who has been on a cruise.
Oh, okay.
And they have to, and then afterwards, when we debriefed, it was like, okay, all right, you pick on the kid, and it'd be like, all right, so tell me someone who's been on a cruise. And all right, this guy bag. So where'd you go on a cruise? And most of the time it was Alaska.
Yeah, that's because very common in the Pacific
Seattle,
Northwest.
And yeah, that makes sense. And I honestly
it sounds beautiful. I'd love to go on an Alaskan cruise. I mean, I'm not a cruise person, but if I'm going to do one, I'd love to see Alaska.
Well, and John, the one and only time that I've been on a cruise
is the one and only time I've been on a cruise too.
Okay, there you go. That's what I thought. Was 2003, I believe.
Yeah, I was like 20. You would have been 26 or so with our family, as we are brothers, for those who don't know that. Yeah, I was thinking about that cruise the other day because I was listening to another podcast where somebody was talking about, cruise ship entertainment. And I remember on the cruise that we went on, which was to the U.S. Virgin Islands or something like that. And I remember the entertainment, or one of the entertainers on board was comedian Rondell Sheridan, who is about to be on a new show called That's So Raven, or was already
on That's So Raven.
But it was currently airing or something like that. And
yes,
Rondell Sheridan.
Wow, I have not thought about that since actually seeing Rondell Sheridan perform. Literally, he walked off stage and
into the sea and was never heard from again
until now.
It was like, well, that went well. See ya never.
And this is how I'm going out.
Yeah, and went to visit Atlantis. I imagine also that an Alaskan cruise has a different vibe from a Caribbean cruise.
Well, yeah, and also the time. I don't know if cruises are still big spring break things, but I remember it. In the 90s,
sure.
It was you didn't want to take your family on a Caribbean cruise during spring break.
No, I feel like the only times I hear about cruises now anymore are just about the awful things that go wrong on them.
Right. The dysentery.
Yes. And speaking of things that go wrong places, I don't know. The gold rush. Let's talk about
Speaking of getting stuck somewhere and needing to meet your shoe.
Yeah. So the 1925 Charlie Chaplin film, The Gold Rush. On the last episode, we had alluded to a fact that I'm sure we share with so many people who are fans of cinema and comedy, big Charlie Chaplin fans going way back. Dan, do you remember when you first really became a Charlie Chaplin fan?
So I want to say 5th grade. So for 5th grade, for the talent show, this was not America's Got Talent, but I remember for that, I did a Charlie Chaplin Keystone Cops bit. And I'm pretty sure like our mother pretty much conceptualized the whole thing. We rehearsed in our basement a lot, and I was Chaplin. I was chubby Chaplin. I mean Charlie Chaplin. And I did the walk and everything, and I'm pretty sure that was like the first time I saw The Gold Rush. I think.
Okay. You watched that to kind of prepare for it.
That must have been. I know that was one of the, if not the first Chaplin film I saw.
Dan, before we talk more about The Gold Rush, I actually remember some elements about that particular talent show that you were in and I was in the audience of. Oh, because wow. I think I may remember your, Keystone Cop routine a little bit, but there was one routine and I certainly don't know who did this, but there was one talent routine that has glued itself into my memory. And I certainly don't know who the people were who were doing it, but there was a lip sync dance performance to the song by the group The Boys called Dial My Heart. And they had these giant cutout telephones on, and certainly you wouldn't remember it. You were busy doing your own thing, but I was in the audience and I was mesmerized by the song Dial My Heart by The Boys.
I mean, you mentioned the cutout phones, and that rings a bell.
Yeah, well, that song, as I'm doing my quick research now, came out in 1988. So I imagine that, timeline checks out. It's not like a created memory that it's a real deal thing. Yeah, fascinating stuff.
That definitely plays. I have no doubt that happened.
But let's talk about The Boys, and I don't mean the group The Boys. Let's talk about Black Larson, Big Jim McKay, and Charlie Chaplin.
Hold on, but before we get into that, you asked me, when did I first become a Chaplin fan, and also, by the way, after 5th grade, went on to I read at least one biography, like pretty lengthy biography. Remember getting it from the library. Saw the film directed by Richard Attenborough, like in theaters, was very excited
91
to see it. 92.
Mm-hmm.
But tell me about your, what's the history of your, familiarities with / fandom of Charles Chaplin, Sir Charles Chaplin?
Yeah. I think that for me, it was just, and I'm sure that you also had this kind of experience, but, he was just a character that was always around and present. And I think that, we grew up during a time where there were a lot of retrospective VHS tapes that would come through the house of, old classics and, kind of short things here and there. And I do remember seeing some Charlie Chaplin routines that way. Certainly I was a big fan of the film Chaplin that you mentioned because I was 9 years old and there were boobs in it. And we saw it in the theater for sure. And that's a very formative time during a young heterosexual boy's life. But aside from that, the movie itself I felt really great. And I loved Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of Charlie Chaplin. And certainly when I was 9, I wasn't understanding so much of what was going on about, the political influences or anything like
affairs.
That. Oh yeah. How they definitely didn't make you they didn't put you in the position of really feeling like, ooh, what a sleaze Chaplin was, but they definitely were like
the statutory rape stuff.
Yeah, they mentioned it, but it was like, but moving on.
And then he married her for a while, a little bit.
Yeah. So, and I mean, not to mention his, I guess, final wife, who is in the end Una, and when they met, she was still like 15 or something, very young. He was like 40.
Yeah, no.
In his 40s.
I mean, he did a lot of things that would have been very problematic now.
Yeah.
Should have been problematic then.
Yeah.
You know what, John? Speaking of, if I can just throw in, because it's kind of a coincidence, but I kind of started watching the movie Babylon. I kind of put it on over, I'd be doing some work. I'd just be doing some going over stuff from the day. And I was like, oh, let me put this on because it seems like it's, entertaining and probably has good music and everything. I've had it on. It was really interesting because it's this, same time period.
Sure. Yeah.
And he's definitely referenced in it. I don't think Chaplin makes a cameo. I haven't watched the whole thing yet. I'm watching it in pieces.
Because it's very long.
Well, yeah, it's very long and doesn't necessarily feel like it. Like, it feels like there's definitely segments, and I'm like, okay, I can pause this here. But I do think that, kind of watching that and, seeing that, even though it's fictionalized, a behind the scenes look of the Hollywood of the 20s and how movies were being made. When I watched The Gold Rush, I thought a lot about, okay, well, it's a silent film. And this is definitely not like, if you sat down your average teenager, I'm going to be just going to stereotype here. And, you're like, this is one of the greatest films of all time. It's one of the greatest comedies of all time. Prepare yourself. And I just put it on. I don't know how far they would get before they'd be like, really? Okay. But if you set it up and just be like, all right, imagine there was really no way to do special effects.
No, the special effects in this movie, and I'm going to do a synopsis in a minute. The special effects are fantastic.
It's like making you think all right, as I'm watching this, I need to look at it from the lens of okay, I've seen Chaplin before. I've seen the little Tramp, kind of the Mr. Bean of the, the 19 teens and 20s. Yeah. But, of course, when you're the first to do it,
sure. The proto Mr. Bean.
Right. Yeah. So it's, and it's this larger scale story, it's not just taking place in a city. It's in Alaska. And I was like, how many people in the world could, at that time, I don't think there were a lot of Alaska cruises running in 1925.
Right.
Alaska wasn't a tourist attraction.
Alaska wasn't a state. It was the Yukon territory.
Territory.
Yeah.
It was territory, and the people who went there were prospectors, but, for the most part, by and large, prospectors, miners. And, in the gold rush, it's, kind of, family friendly, but, the women who knew they could make a living fulfilling the needs of all of the men there.
Sure. Yeah.
So, if you see a movie like McCabe and Mrs. Miller, that fills in that one fills in the blanks.
Right.
But watching it from that perspective and just saying like everything that he is doing, like he is doing for real. There are no, like, everything that you're seeing happen, I know you're going to synopsize, they figured out how to have that happen for real. And what's funny is how, foreshadowing, this theme is going to come back in our next episode.
Okay.
And watching it, and it's like, yes, okay, there's there's definitely parts where the film is sped up and that, for the comedic effect of what's happening. But other than that, like, there's no special effects, and there's some really mind-blowing things, especially
there are special effects. It's just all practical.
Well, it's all that's what I'm saying is there's nothing digital. There's nothing they're doing in post, probably.
It's ingenuity.
Other than editing.
Yeah, it's miniatures, it's matte paintings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But hardly any miniatures. Like Chaplin had to be convinced to use a miniature.
Right. Well, and that's pretty much just in one moment when he's like dangling off of a cliff, essentially. And the fact that you can tell it's a miniature kind of makes it better.
And also just thinking like, we're still at the dawn of cinema here, right, and people are seeing things for the first time.
Yeah.
It's not the new iteration of something. It's the thing. It's the original.
Absolutely.
So that said, John, let's have a synopsis.
A lone prospector braves the harsh conditions of Alaska to strike gold, but is quickly faced with a nasty snowstorm. He takes refuge in a cabin inhabited by a wanted criminal, Black Larson, and another prospector, Big Jim McKay, who had stumbled upon a massive gold formation, but wasn't able to dig out his claim due to the weather. Once the weather clears, the prospector makes his way to a nearby settlement, weasels his way into a house-sitting gig, and falls in love with a local babe, Georgia. Black Larson, on the other hand, dies in an avalanche, and Big Jim suffers a head injury and doesn't remember the location of his gold. As the prospector spends his time attempting to woo Georgia, Big Jim tracks down the prospector and hopes that he'll take him back to the cabin, which isn't far from Big Jim's claim. In exchange, Big Jim offers to make the prospector a millionaire. So the things that I think a lot of people will visualize if you haven't seen the gold rush take place in the cabin, where, it kind of shifts around and, they open up the door and the wind is blowing everybody around. And there's this great moment where Big Jim is so hungry and he visualizes the tramp, the prospector, as a chicken. And there's a time where they're, eating his shoe, which, by the way, looked pretty delicious.
If you like licorice, yeah.
But it just looked like an enjoyable thing to eat, the way that they were eating it.
Well, the way that he was eating it, the way Chaplin was eating it, and I mean, that was one of those things that was that one of those moments that was so funny, because he's just like, you know what? Hey, we're going to have a awesome Thanksgiving meal. And no matter what, I'm going to enjoy it like I enjoy every other Thanksgiving meal.
Yeah. And it's really fascinating. And the way that especially Big Jim and the prospector kind of get by as this storm passes, which is taking place over quite some time, is really interesting to watch. And the elements of Black Larson, who Charlie just wanted to kill these guys, but once he actually did get out, met his own demise. So it was kind of a short-lived thing that was probably just there to increase the drama at the beginning and add some intrigue.
Well, and let's not forget that Black Larson has also, he has left the cabin because he's, kind of, they draw cards to see who's going to go and find food.
Yeah.
So he goes off and runs into the cops. Yeah, the cops basically, who are in a tent waiting out the storm, but they're looking for him. Yeah. So he kills them, takes their sled of food and provisions, and then he goes and then he finds Big Jim's stake.
Right.
He finds the claim, and that's how Big Jim gets the injury. Is he finds Black Larson like hits him over the head and then escapes, and then meets his karma gets him. He meets his demise.
Nasty avalanche.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot going on here.
Yeah. And there's two segments kind of at the beginning and I guess the kind of end that take place in the cabin that are really memorable. They're really fun. A lot of big, special effects happening there that they're doing all practically in a studio. And in between those is this segment that happens in this town that is set up for the prospectors who are all out there. And it's kind of like this little establishment develops. And that's where you have Georgia, who, she is the popular girl. She's got her group of friends. She's got the guy who's, kind of seeing her, but also a jerk and, not really, they're not in a relationship. They're in a situationship, I guess you could say.
He treats her like crap.
Oh, yeah. That dude sucks. But the prospector is quite taken by her. And in an effort to, I guess, make this other guy jealous, does this dance with the prospector, the tramp. And man, oh man, is it so funny. The ways that he, while doing this dance, is trying to keep his pants up. At one point, he's using his cane to do it, which is funny.
Yeah.
And then he gets a rope, but the rope is tied to a dog. And there's a dog. Like, that was a laugh out loud moment for me when the dog came out from under the table because he had used the leash to hold his pants.
Yes.
I was loving that. And there's a lot of, miscommunication that happens. And when Georgia and her friends stumble upon the prospector's cabin that he's staying in, and she discovers that he has like a picture of her and all that, like, her friends really are kind of just being jerks about it and kind of making fun of him. And they make these plans to have dinner with him on New Year's Eve. And, he pulls out all the stops. He, in order to make money to pay for food and everything, does all this, snow shoveling for businesses, which of course is its own separate set piece for hilarity. And when it actually is New Year's Eve, what we later discover is a dream sequence contains one of the most iconic moments of Charlie Chaplin buffoonery, which is when he does the little dance with the forks and the rolls.
I would guess perhaps the most imitated of his bits. I mean, like, I wish I would say right now, raise your hands if you've done that bit. if you've ever taken a couple of forks and a couple of dinner rolls and made them dance. Like, I know I've done it.
I don't know if I've done it.
I definitely did it. At Sea Island.
Wow.
When we would go there.
Sea Island, Georgia. We'll get to Georgia in a few episodes.
Yes,
we'll talk more about our experience in Georgia.
I know we've referenced Sea Island before, but I definitely, like, when I was a kid, definitely did that a bunch.
There you have it.
I'm sure I'm not alone.
Yeah. But as the Notorious B.I.G. says, it was all a dream. And when he finally, confronts or is about to confront Georgia about it, he is given this letter that in the 1925 version, and we'll get back to that in a second, is originally written out to that other dude who's a jerk to her and says, "I'm sorry, I can explain, I love you." And, he sees it, thinks that she gave it to him. And, but before anything can be cleared up, Big Jim finds him and they head on back to the cabin where they are out to become millionaires. And, Dan, I did a little calculation. Do you know how much $1 million in, 1925 would be kind of worth today, essentially?
I'm going to guess, and I'm going to take it's a very broad guess. I'm going to say 50 million.
Okay, well, it's not as exciting as that.
No.
It's $17,468,057.14. But that is just $1 million. We don't know how many millions he stands to get from this claim that Big Jim has made.
Whatever it is, it would be 50 million today.
Sure. I'm sure that's how the calculation works out. Yeah. And so the film kind of rounds out where he and Big Jim are, in their furs and their fancy suits, and they're on a boat, and they there's an article being written about them, and meanwhile Georgia is there to head off someplace else. I forget even where they're going, and she finds out that there is a stowaway on board. And when she sees the prospector, who at the time is wearing his old clothes for a photo shoot, she thinks, well, he must certainly be the stowaway, and tries to protect him. And that show of decency really goes a long way. And it kind of proves that, she's not just in it for the goofs. And she actually, kind of likes this guy without knowing that he's a millionaire. And, when that reveals itself to be true, they kind of go off together, and, the rest, I guess, is history. I don't know. It's not really history because it didn't really happen. True.
Yeah. No.
So Dan, did you also watch the 1942 version?
I watched what I believe is the Criterion 1925 version.
Sure. Yeah.
That's streaming on Max.
Yeah.
Which incorporates, I think, the music from the 1942 version.
Yeah, because Chaplin kind of scrapped the original one when he made his own director's cut, all those years later. And then it was recreated. So it has some of the music from the 42 and some that isn't. And the difference also is that the 1925 version has just music and title cards. And in 42, he got rid of all of the title cards, and Chaplin narrates everything and also says and then Big Jim says blah, 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 and then Georgia says da, 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 da.
Did you watch that version?
I did, and it's weird.
Where did you watch that?
It's also on Max.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was kind of weird hearing him talk through the whole thing, because it takes away a lot of the, I guess, intrigue of it, and it gives you the opportunity to pay less attention, which makes you miss things, I think.
Right.
Also, what he does is at the end, the letter that Georgia writes in the 1942 version is actually intended for the prospector, and just says I'm so sorry. And it doesn't say I love you, but it just says my bad, Georgia.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was kind of weird. I know that there's probably some other differences that anybody can probably find online, but those were the big ones. The narration rather than the title cards, which it really took me out of it.
Yeah.
Because he's describing the things that are happening, and he's kind of giving you more about his intention with it, rather than letting you kind of put your own thoughts behind it.
That's funny.
Yeah, you should watch a little bit of it sometime, just to get a feel for what I'm talking about. But it's he speaks very quickly, and he's yeah, and then this happens, and then he's shoveling the snow, but this one doesn't see that, and then this one happens with that, and and it's very fast. But, as we see in the movie Chaplin, he was very averse to dialogue and, a lot of traditional sound in movies, and really dug his heels in, and, was late in the game to actually using sound the same way that a lot of other movies were using it.
He was on it's just a fad.
Yeah, I think it wasn't until The Great Dictator that he really, or maybe one or two before that he really got into it.
Yeah, I feel like Great Dictator was early on in his sound.
Yeah. But I agree, because there's so much about the Tramp that works because you can't hear his voice.
Sorry, I just as per Wikipedia, Great Dictator was indeed his first sound film.
There you go.
But 1940, so yeah.
Right.
Definitely. And Jazz Singer was 1927, so sound
It had been around for a while. Yeah.
It was definitely not a fad.
Right. Yeah. But and I think that one of the important things about that and Charlie Chaplin is that the character that does a lot of the speaking in The Great Dictator isn't the Tramp, although I believe that the Tramp makes an appearance in it, but I don't think that he's certainly not. He's not the Great Dictator. He's not the dictator.
The barber, because he plays two characters. The barber character that he plays is like Tramp-esque.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. And shamefully, I have not seen the entirety of The Great Dictator.
Oh,
unfortunately,
it's been a while for me.
When I watched it, I watched it. I put it on once on a plane and fell asleep.
Quite a bold movie to make in 1940.
Seriously, yeah.
A ballsy move indeed.
Well, yeah.
But
that's why you have your own studio.
Yeah, and I mean a ballsy move from what I would say is the original BDE King, because nobody has more swagger than the original short king Charlie Chaplin. That dude, certainly walked around like his shit didn't stink and got what he wanted at every turn.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, guy made some money, Guy's a huge star. And
yeah, well, I believe that the Gold Rush in its original release earned Chaplin $2 million. I think that's according to Wikipedia. What's $468,057.14 times 2. Whatever that is what he took home in 2023 dollars.
Oh, okay. I mean, well, and I was imagining like audiences seeing this movie, like I was saying before, these are, the movies are still new. And I mean, yes, like you've had Chaplin and Harold Lloyd and Buster Keaton.
Yeah.
And I think the idea that all of them were able to do what they were able to do using practical effects and really just like their own. And by the way, man, making movies back then, like dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, man, like I'm watching them, like there's the scene with the bear when Chaplin's coming through the mountain pass and like there's a bear
right
and it's like, that's a legit bear. That's not like a dude in a costume.
Yeah.
How are they doing this? Like, and of course, like there were no rules. There were no, like, none of the none of the lawsuits that inspired the rules had happened yet.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
it was pretty much just like, Chaplin's like, oh, it would be awesome if we get like a bear to follow me. And like, how do we do that? And everyone else is just like, we get a bear.
You get a bear, yeah.
We'll put someone with like a stake over in that direction.
Yeah.
And
basically
be ready.
Yeah.
For the bear, and you'll just go that way. I don't know. But imagine you're seeing this movie and it's 1925 and you understand all this.
Right.
You're not like, oh, wow, that, no, that bear is totally CGI.
Yeah.
Like where people just like between the bits between the comedy and just like were they just like laughing out loud, has like jaws dropped, like
I imagine it was a jaw dropping situation.
How is he doing that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to imagine again where Babylon kind of inspired me. There's the scene where the character Manuel is at the
kind
premiere.
of the protagonist.
Yeah, well, he's he's like the eyes, the lens through which the, other characters are seen, I guess. And he is at the premiere of The Jazz Singer in New York. Their minds are blown, and there's Al Jolson singing on screen, and people are just standing, applauding, shouting, hooting, hollering, and this guy runs. It's such a great. And I feel like Babylon would have been so much better as an 8-part series. Because of these moments where Manuel runs out because he's out there for, I think Brad Pitt's character, I think, sends him, and he calls him on the phone and he's like, everything's about to change, which would be, of course, the perfect end of the episode moment. But I was like, did people see the gold rush? And were they just telling all their friends, you need to see this? This was a time when it's not like you had new blockbusters every week. They didn't have blockbusters then.
Well, this was a time where movies were being turned around really fast. Chaplin made like a movie a month essentially. Yeah. And it was just one after another, after another, after another, after another. And, they got more complicated, so they would certainly take a lot longer, and they got longer. The Gold Rush is closer to a more traditional feature length.
Well, this was his third. Sure. His third feature, yeah.
Yeah. The fanfare wasn't the same, and I'm sure that also a lot of people went back and saw this over and over and over again.
Right. What else are you going to do?
Video. Also, what else are you going to do? It's 1925.
Well, and it played, probably for a while. You could probably 1927, all right, Gold Rush is still playing.
Yeah.
Why not? Because people are going to go back and see it, because I can't believe that shit I saw. I was laughing so hard at that. I mean, think about the funniest comedies you've seen. And think about rewatching those comedies. I think about a movie like The Big Lebowski, where I'm like, oh, I totally missed that the first time. I think because I was laughing so hard at the other thing that had just happened.
Yeah, yeah.
So you have that, and it's mind blowing still for everybody. So I think it would be so much fun to travel back in time, and go see the Gold Rush opening weekend.
Oh yeah. Well, if I'm going to go back in time, I'm going to make the Gold Rush myself and release it before that one can come out. That'll show them.
Who's going to star?
Oh, it's me.
It's just going to be you?
Yeah, it's hey, I'm just a person. I'm not, the Tramp or anything, but you're going to love this thing I'm going to do with these forks and these rolls.
Yeah, are you also going to
you're going to lose your minds.
Yeah. Will your insurance from 2023 count for you in case anything happens with the bear?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kaiser Permanente, trust me. No, I don't.
Except the bear is going to be Jeremy Allen White from Hulu's The Bear.
Oh.
And people are going to go nuts. They're going to be like, who is this guy?
Yeah. Well, the trainer's got a sandwich in the back. There we go.
Yeah. And it's going to be Danny DeVito from, what was that movie? Jack the Bear?
Oh, yes. Yes. Jack the Bear. Yeah. Oh, wow. Did you ever actually see that?
I don't think so.
I don't know if I saw the whole thing or if I saw part about it, but
you know who's in it? Reese Witherspoon.
Oh, that's an early Reese Witherspoon.
Reese Witherspoon. We got Miko Hughes as well.
Yeah, because it's Danny DeVito plays a widower raising his two kids.
Jack Leary and his younger brother Dylan. Okay, that's way too long of a summary that I'm not going to read, but sure, something like that.
You don't have a synopsis ready for Jack the Bear?
I didn't. What if I had one just prepared just in case Jack the Bear came up?
Jack the Bear, I'm so glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, but while we're on the subject of bears, Alaska also is the location for the Werner Herzog documentary Grizzly Man, which I think is my favorite Alaska movie.
That's your favorite?
I think so. If I had to choose, we don't cover documentaries on this podcast, but if ever given an opportunity to talk about Grizzly Man, you better bet I'm all about it.
I mean, it's not out of the question. My favorite Alaska movie is I am probably going to go with Christopher Nolan's Insomnia.
Okay. I don't know if I've ever seen it.
It was a remake of I want to say it was a Finnish picture.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it was the year of Robin Williams playing psychopaths, because I think it was the same summer as 1 Hour Photo.
1 Hour Photo, yeah.
Which I really liked. Actually, it was the same year as Death to Smoochie as well.
He's taken some interesting turns there, directed by Danny DeVito.
Robin Williams,
Jack the Bear
2002.
Himself.
Yeah, it all comes back to Jack. Insomnia, which the whole deal is they're in Alaska when, during the period when there's always sunlight, and Al Pacino is trying to catch a murderer and dealing with this whole internal affairs investigation. It's probably among my favorite Christopher Nolan movies, because it's not high concept, and I don't mind the high concept. I really enjoy Inception, and I've gone back to Interstellar a bit, which as I've said in the past, I wasn't the biggest fan of, and I think I see more in it, kind of going back a second time. And I love the Dark Knight trilogy.
Yeah.
Which I think Insomnia was what kind of, sealed the deal for that, because that was also the first film Nolan did for Warner Brothers. He did, he had Following, and then Memento, and then he did Insomnia.
Yeah.
And it's a great, it's a more understated Al Pacino performance.
That's hard for me to even imagine.
No, it was, I would say the 90s were more of like his yelly time, though. Also, I think about Donnie Brasco, and he's very subtle. He's very understated.
More subdued in that one.
He's kind of meek in Donnie. I know we're off on a tangent here. And Glenn Ross, I guess he's over the top in that, but I think it's in line with the character. Scent of the Woman is the one that I really am like, no.
Well, Heat is definitely a big one for him.
Oh yeah, it works for me in Heat.
It's a bit much.
It's a bit much, but I would say it's one of the scenes where he's like, "'Cause she's got a great ass, and you've got your head all the way up." That's one of the scenes I watched the movie for.
Do you suppose that he would have played Black Larson if Al Pacino was cast in The Gold Rush? I think that's where he would fall.
Yes. One. Yes, yeah. I
and you could do Danny DeVito as Big Jim McKay, with Big Jim as being one of those
that's ironic,
ironic nicknames.
Yeah.
Or he could be the bear, because he's Jack the Bear.
He's Jack the Bear. Yeah. Imagine the Tramp just turns around and realizes it's Danny DeVito. For some reason, I'm picturing him in the penguin costume.
Okay. And then also for the guy who's playing with George's heart there, Timothy Treadwell from Grizzly Man.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've never seen Grizzly Man.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, it's so good.
Yeah, I know. I actually think I have a DVD copy of it.
How many times have I probably mentioned Mr. Chocolate to you without you knowing what I'm talking about? I can't even imagine.
I don't think you've mentioned it.
Oh,
once,
Dan, it's so good.
Does not sound familiar. Mr. Chocolate.
You got to watch Grizzly Man.
I will watch Grizzly Man. Yeah. Not today.
Okay. All right. Tomorrow.
Who knows what tomorrow holds?
Well, let's see what tomorrow might hold for the fate of the Gold Rush. Dan, what would you do to bring this one back?
I really gave a lot of thought to that, because you can't really remake it. I don't think there's really a call for a sequel. I don't necessarily know that this works with anyone other than Charlie Chaplin, and I'm all in support of using live actors giving live performances on film. So I really was thinking about it. And one of the things I was thinking about even before watching the movie, I was like, could you like remake this, but like as a serious film? And like, the prospector is not just like, an adorable tramp, like, just kind of, walking his way through the Klondike in his like, regular shoes and, mountain climbing without any gear. Like I'm imagining, the prospector, is like a scruffy faced, gaunt, like Timothy Chalamet, seeking his fortune in the Klondike. But like, he's really like, he's out there, and there's also like, there's a history to that character, and the weather is I mean, I'm kind of, as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, so it would kind of be The Revenant, but
okay.
I mean, I guess The Revenant has the bear.
Jack the Bear.
I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, I guess the way that I'm thinking about this gold rush, this like, serious, legit, like we're going to make the movie, we're going to take the plot of the gold rush, but we're going to make it like, this is really the gold rush. Like, I mean, there's like, there will be the prostitutes in the town. There will be sex workers in the town. They will not just be quote unquote dancers.
Right.
There's going to be some bad stuff. What's the guy's name? Who's like the, like douchey player?
Is it Jack Cameron?
Is that, yeah, that's it. So like Jack would be like really, is like sleazy. Like you'd really,
right.
Yeah. You really want this guy to, like, this is, real, like this is one of those people who takes advantage of the fact that like if you have enough money you could get away with anything.
I'm picturing Billy Zane and Titanic.
Yes ding ding ding, spot on. Billy Zane
and a crossover hint, wink wink, to our next episode. Go on.
Oh, indeed. Wow, jeez, things are getting zany.
Ooh.
That was what I was thinking, but now that as I'm talking about it and I'm picturing it more, all I'm picturing are scenes from The Revenant.
Oh, geez.
So maybe not. I don't know. Like it would be easy to, turn it into a musical because I mean, and they've had like, there was the Chaplin musical. So I guess if anything, just maybe more like, big screen cinematic, like you need to see it. Like maybe a Christopher Nolan movie about the gold rush. So I would,
okay.
Christopher Nolan can do historical drama. We know that now. So, hey.
Well, he did The Prestige.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah, that too. Yeah. Yes. So,
where it kind of bends historical figures with a fabricated story.
Right. But I would like to see him do like a legit, like a fact-based, like there's a lot of research that goes into it, like film about the gold rush and prospecting in Alaska, and perhaps like, the fates of, an escaped killer, and a, I guess underwhelming prospector, and then I don't know, Big Jim, which in a perfect world I don't think this casting would work for the like this version of it, but Nick Offerman Big Jim.
I 100% thought of Nick Offerman not only for something having to do with this, but also something having to do with our next episode, but we'll get to that when we get to that.
That makes sense. Yeah. So what would you do with the gold rush?
Well, Dan, I'm going to try and explain this as eloquently as possible, but it might get a little convoluted. So just bear with me. But at the end of the gold rush, we see the tramp, dressed to the nines on this boat with Georgia and Big Jim, who's got his corns freshly filed down by the manicurist. And there is a historical figure that is the subject of our next film who historically goes to Alaska with his, with his common law wife. This is not something that is portrayed in the next movie, but it is portrayed in its 1994, I guess, deep impact to the film's Armageddon, where the main character is on a boat going to Alaska during the gold rush. And I would love to see, even if it's just a short, a recreation of the boat where, the Tramp and Georgia are, just on the boat, passing by they're leaving Alaska as another boat is going to Alaska, featuring the main character, which is a real historical figure who really went to Alaska during the gold rush after the events of next week's movie, which, Dan, do you want to tell everyone what that's going to be?
All right. Yes. Well, next week we are having another shift in geography, climate, etc., because we are headed from Alaska to Arizona. Specifically, we are headed to Tombstone, the 1993, I would say cult classic.
Yeah.
Directed by George Cosmatos, and starring Kurt Russell as Wyatt Earp, Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday. We've got Sam Elliott and Bill Paxton, Michael Biehn, Powers Booth, Jason Priestley,
Billy Zane,
and Dana Delaney. Don't want to leave
Dana Delaney.
Dana Delaney's in there. Yes. Joanna Pakula, Billy Bob Thornton.
It is a murderer's row of hot actors of the 90s.
Yes, it is quite a movie. If you've never seen it before, check it out and check out.
Right now it is streaming on Tubi with ads.
Tubi.
Well, Dan, I really hope that everybody is enjoying our travels through America alphabetically. Please email us, ruinchildhoodspod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the Gold Rush, Alaska movies, anything that we might have.
Your state.
Yeah.
Movies that you feel like represent your state.
I know. Are you from Kentucky and you desperately need us to cover a particular movie from Kentucky? Email us. It may be tossed into the bin of considerations. And and check out the link in this episode's description. We've got a cool TeePublic store and some other fun stuff.
Yes,
and check out there.
Because I was about to say, in terms of, we know what states we're going to, but in terms of the movies we're going to, nothing is set in stone except for Tombstone.
Ooh. Well, Dan, as you are, headed off to the Yukon territory, I wish you a good journey.
Good journey.